Welcome back to another episode of the podcast.
What's up?
How you doing?
It's good.
How's your day?
It's all right.
Not you. um, all right, we are going to be continuing on with our conversation about Joseph, but before we do that, BuzzFeed is going to tell me what I should have for dinner tonight. They better pick right because my dinner's right in front of me.
So they're definitely going to pick wrong. Because I can see what
Absolutely.
your dinner is. They're not going to get it right.
They're not going to get it. So eat some Oreos and we'll tell you what you should have for dinner tonight. First, pick a classic Oreo. Original, golden, lemon, or peanut butter. I love me a golden.
First off, since when is lemon and peanut butter a
I have
classic
no
Oreo?
idea. No.
Right? Like, whoever's writing these quizzes for BuzzFeed, just say pick an Oreo flavor, please.
But also, like, an original is like now I want Oreos.
I kind of want to try the lemon one.
I think I've tried them before. They're okay. They taste like those other cookies that are like, you can get them across the street at the deli, like a 4-pack or a 6-pack or whatever.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I feel like you can't do this with milk, though.
Mm-hmm. I would only do the golden or the... Of these four, I would only do the golden or the original with milk.
Yeah.
What'd you pick?
Pick classic.
Classic?
Same classic.
Boring. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I was going to say, too.
Next, pick a stuffed Oreo. Mega stuffed, golden double stuffed, the most stuffed. I don't like these multiple stuffs.
Yeah,
I don't
I hate double
Yeah.
stuff.
No one can see you. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. I just want. Just give me regular. I'll do regular
Really?
double stuff. I don't like too much cream.
I did golden double stuff.
I was gonna do golden double stuff, but I did golden the last one, so I figured I'd switch it up this time.
I like a regular double stuff.
Pick a thin tiramisu, mint, original, golden. Mint.
Tiramisu.
Tiramisu is good, but I love me a mint chocolate.
I've never had the tiramisu. I'm gonna go golden.
Pick a limited edition: pumpkin spice,
Nope.
dirt cake,
Maybe.
space dunk, mint
Maybe.
chip. What is space dunk? Cosmic cream. I can't read it.
Yeah, that's the only word I can make out. Oh no, with popping candy.
Oh, I think I've had that. My eyes hurt from that.
And then does dirt cake have the actual gummy worms in it? Like,
I don't think
it
so.
doesn't look like it has gummy worms in
I'm
it.
gonna Google it
Because
because then I can actually see the
definitely not pumpkin spice. I know that. Maybe the mint chip,
I
but
love me a mint chip. Dirt cake flavor cream, gummy worm inspired sprinkles on top. Oh, there's like little bits of gummy worm on the. I don't know if you can see it in the picture.
okay.
I'm gonna do space dunk.
Yeah, space dunk. What'd y'all pick?
I did pumpkin spice. Same.
Yeah, of course.
I
figured.
feel like the two of them were gonna be pumpkin spice.
Lastly, pick a holiday or were you
No,
hot cocoa, gingerbread, s'mores, or spooky.
well, we're Christian, so we're not picking spooky. Were you gonna pick spooky?
I wasn't gonna pick spooky, but
I mean, you could pick it. No one's gonna know, except God.
that's a lie. I'm gonna do gingerbread. I'm between gingerbread and s'mores, to be fair. But I don't think I've ever tried a s'more Oreo. I've had the gingerbread though. I think.
Like the hot cocoa to me sounds good, but it also sounds like it's gonna be really bad.
I feel like it'll just be chocolatey, like a chocolate
Yeah.
cream kind of.
go with s'mores then.
All right, I got pizza night. Me and Far got pizza night. Your Oreo choices have led us to suggest a cozy pizza night. Whether you prefer classic pepperoni, veggie packed, or something more adventurous like barbecue chicken, tonight's dinner is all about indulging in gooey cheese and savory toppings. Enjoy a slice or a few of piping hot pizza straight from the oven. First of all, barbecue chicken is not adventurous. Second of all, incorrect. That's not what I had for dinner tonight. Leave a comment if you want to know what I did.
Your Oreo, I got barbecue bonanza.
That's fitting for you, though.
Yeah. Your Oreo preferences have steered us toward a mouth-watering barbecue bonanza. Fire up the grill and savor juicy burgers, tender ribs, or grilled chicken slathered in tangy barbecue sauce, paired with classic sides like coleslaw, cornbread, or baked beans for a hearty and satisfying dinner tonight.
Hmm.
That makes my dinner tonight look very sad.
It's 2 Lunchables, 2 packs of Lunchables, which he's gonna have for dinner.
I
Is it
really
actually-
am. I'm more than like, because it's been in that lunchbox now, so I have to eat it tonight.
Yikes!
I mean, it was in the fridge for most of today, but yeah.
I got homemade tacos. Your Oreo preferences have pointed us towards a vibrant taco night. Get ready to assemble your own delicious creations with fresh tortillas, zesty salsa, and your choice of fillings, whether it's tender carne asada, flavorful grilled veggies, or spicy chicken. Tonight's dinner is all about building the perfect taco just the way you like it.
I could go for a taco.
Yeah.
I feel like that one was not wrong. Mine was way off.
All right. So now that we know,
BuzzFeed.
yeah, we're continuing our conversation on Joseph, right? So he's in prison at this point in the story, right? Now we're gonna talk a little bit about how he gets out of prison. Right?
Yay.
So how do I word this?
I don't know.
Have you ever been in situations in which you felt as though God has forgotten you? Oh, that's why there was a first page of notes I should look at. Yes. Have you ever felt like God has forgotten you in certain in situations?
Yeah, I feel like we also talked about this a little bit before, where it was like when he was sold into slavery and stuff. I think I have felt that, and that's also when we spoke about this a few episodes ago, where it's like I drew from God because I relied on myself because I felt like he wasn't like doing what I needed him to do.
So, in those situations, how did you end up, I guess, I don't want to say coming back to God, but maybe realizing that God was still there with you in the situation?
I think it was because there are times when you'll venture out on your own, you're crash and you burn, and then you're like, all right, God, you were right. But there are also other times where it's like, I don't know if I know everything, right? Like I know that I don't know everything, right?
Okay.
So I know that I may think that this is right, but I don't know if this is the way I'm supposed to do it.
Okay.
So at that point, I'm like, God, I'm taking myself out of this equation. I'm gonna leave it to you. Do
Okay.
your thing.
Okay.
Okay. Do we follow?
Yeah.
Are we sure?
Yeah, no, I do. So, with that, okay, so with this idea in mind of sometimes certain situations we can feel like maybe God did forget us, right? I've been in situations where I felt that, and it was what took me out of that mindset was literally someone else calling me on the phone and saying, "Hey, I just wanted you to know that I've been praying for you, and I feel like God was saying this, this, and this." And it was literally God saying, "I have not forgotten you in this situation." Right? I think there are other times God has been not as overt as just saying, "Hey, I haven't forgotten you." But there's been other times where I felt like, "Hey, maybe God has forgotten me in the situation," and he's, I think, kind of showed up in ways where it's like, "Oh, you know what? No, God is still there. He's still watching out for me. He still is here with me in the situation." So Joseph has now he's like the king of the prisoners under the warden, right? And two of Pharaoh's servants get thrown in prison. Um, the cupbearer and the baker, right? While in prison, both of these men have dreams, and Joseph interprets these dreams, right? Um, when they leave the prison, Joseph tells them, "Hey, remember me so that I can get released as well." Um, but they forget about him for 2 years, right? Again, we go back to this idea of, you know, God has given you this ability, right? But I can really imagine Joseph, to me, if I had the ability to interpret dreams and I'm doing that in a prison, I do believe I would feel like I'm really underutilizing the ability God has given me. I don't know if you feel the same way or not, but
Okay.
um and to then say, "Hey guys, remember me now that you're back with the Pharaoh," because, and I'm sure Joseph probably told them the entire story of what happened to him, so they probably know he's falsely imprisoned and all of that. Um Yet time passes by again,
Mhm.
right? And we see Joseph kind of still stuck in prison, right? We know, or based on the narrative story, we know it's 2 years. I don't know if Joseph knows how much time passes while he's in prison, right? I imagine they don't give them calendars to like keep in their cell. Um, how would you feel in that situation where not only does God show up, he gives you this gift and this ability, you use it, right? You know it's from God, right? You're not trying to pretend like it's not or anything like that. And then more time passes and again it seems like you're forgotten.
I feel like it'd be easy to be discouraged and to just like want to turn away from literally everything. Um, but in times like those, although it seems as though we're forgotten or we've been overlooked, it's those times where we need to draw closer to God.
Yeah, I think it can be difficult when God's plan doesn't happen on our timing.
Hmm.
And then in that, the waiting can then be frustrating, right? Especially when we want God to act and we're praying for him to act. Um and I think it's hard for us to sometimes see that even in our waiting God is at work, right? Um I can only imagine, like, realistically, um as we go through the story, Pharaoh has a dream. He calls all of his like wise men people to interpret the dream. None of them can. And then the guys remember, "Oh, hey, remember that guy in prison that can interpret dreams? Hey, Pharaoh, there's a guy in prison who can interpret dreams." Joseph interprets a dream, and that's how Joseph gets out of prison, right? The time it takes, though, right? Because we don't see what's happening, or if we're Joseph, we don't see what's happening in the palace, right? We don't see that God is doing something in the palace where the Pharaoh has to have this dream and that it has to go through this process of he has to call in all his wise men, right? And they have to listen to it. Then they got to sit on it and think about it and try to give an interpretation, right? We don't see all of those things, right? For us as Joseph, all we see is the inside of the prison, right? And I do know that that can be difficult, but as you said, we have to remember who God is, right? And we have to find ourselves in a place where we can trust that God is good and that God is God, and that in this situation, God will do um,
What God does.
what God does. I would say do right by us, but really, it's God's gonna do what God does. Um, right? So we see Joseph wasn't forgotten by God, even though it's easy to feel like he was. In time, Pharaoh hears about Joseph's gifts, sends for him. God makes a way for Joseph, even though Joseph could not see it. We tend to respond to God based on what we can see, um, and then unfortunately, sometimes reacting poorly when we don't see any improvement in our lives. Um, how would your how would your trust in God change if we could see what God was doing behind the scenes?
I feel like I don't want to say that I wouldn't have to trust him because I would see the works, right? Like I wouldn't have to trust him because I know that things are going to get done. So I wouldn't have to have faith because I would see the things. But then if there's ever an instance to come where I don't see that God is, where I don't explicitly see God's plan, like my foundation is going to be crumbled.
So you use two words there. Use trust and faith, right? And I think seeing what God is doing behind the scenes would take away from my faith, but not my trust in Him. Meaning,
Yeah.
as a little kid, like I saw my mom cook dinner and trusted that I would get food,
Mhm.
right? Um, it wasn't until I don't know, like high school or something, where like maybe I wasn't home when she'd be making dinner, but I had faith that she would like in
Yeah.
that sense. Um, so I think that's kind of what it would be for me and God. And I think it'd be the same thing for you, just kind of use the words interchangeably. If I'm
Yeah. Like
getting
I wouldn't have to build my trust
Right.
in him because I would, or like my faith in him because.
right, and I think that's something that we have to be mindful of, I think,
Mhm.
right? That there is a reason why we don't see the entire picture, right? Um, because if we do see the entire picture, then what's the point of faith at that point,
Mhm. I
right?
think there are also so many moving parts sometimes that if we were to see the entire picture, I don't know if we'd be able to fully comprehend what each moving piece is doing. Right? Like, why did this thing have to happen in order for that person to meet this person to talk to
Mhm.
them to introduce me? Right? Like, do
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah. No, I totally agree because realistically, I think, and even as I said it, I realized saying that we see the entire big picture, we'd have to have like a God level of comprehension,
Yeah.
right? Because as you said, there are so many moving pieces to get like realistically, right? God's path for Joseph was by any human standard was illogical,
Mhm.
right? To go to say, hey, you're gonna be because even with the dreams that Joseph originally gets, right? It's I'm gonna be higher than my brothers, right? And then I'm gonna be higher than my brothers and my parents,
Mm.
right? At no point do I ever think, or if I was Joseph, would I ever think that the next step in God's plan after giving me these two dreams is to throw me in a pit and
Mhm.
my brothers are gonna fake my death to my father, right? And then one of them says he's gonna save me, but before he can save me, I get sold into slavery. And then while I'm in slavery, I get accused of sleeping with my boss's wife and I get thrown in jail. And then I get forgotten about in jail for a number of years, right? It's a really illogical thing because, again, for us, it's like going from point A to B, it's okay, then you have to get an education. So you're going to go to school and you're going to go training and do classes or whatever. And then you may work at a lower level and then build your way up, which realistically is what Joseph did, just in a really weird way that we wouldn't really expect. And I think that's one of the things with God. He often has a way of putting us in certain places for his timing, not ours.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that is something that took me a while to kind of learn in my own life, where it's like, God, why put me in this particular position? Why put me in this place right now? It doesn't seem fitting for me in what you've called me to do. And then all of a sudden, one person asks a question, and it's like, oh, okay, God, I see why you put me here, right? I see why I'm in this situation now, right? I don't know if you've ever found yourself in.
Yeah, hindsight is 2020, right? So I might not understand why I'm in certain situations that I haven't put myself in, right? Because it's not like it's the consequence of my actions or anything, but it's God putting me where He needs me to be. But after the fact, it's easy to look back and be like, okay, well, I see why you did that, or I see what I had to learn from that or gain from it.
Yeah. So we see Joseph interpret the dreams, and that's all in Genesis 41. I'm really not going to read it right now. But as he does that, right? Um, we see that when he does interpret the Pharaoh's dreams, rather, he doesn't take credit for it. He gives God the credit, right? Joseph has always been able in his life to keep God at the center despite the situations, right? I think for whatever like season of life you're in, that's something that we should all be striving to do, right? Like if you're in that part of life where you're just in school or college and things like that, right? And there are a lot of distractions in school that take can kind of knock God away from being the center, right? Same thing if you're working, or if you're working and going to school, if you're in a relationship, right? You're married, you have family, whatever it is. There's always something that can take that center spot in your life, right? That top priority, right? Yet Joseph found a way, despite every situation, right? Whether good or bad, God was always priority, right? How do you think we do that?
Keep God at the center.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to your relationship with Him, right? Because if you have a strong foundation on who God is and what He can, not just what He can do for you, but like what you can do for Him, right? I think it's a symbiotic relationship, right? So it's not just what God can do for me, but it's what am I doing for Him as well. I think when you have that strong foundation and that strong relationship with God, it's it's easier to maintain it and to keep Him at the center. Because even when things go wrong, the first instinct will be take it to God, right? Keep God in the center of it. What, like, God help me through this. God give me the wisdom, grant me the whatever it is that I need. And then also once you live a life where you're following the word and you're keeping that at the center in the easy times, as things get harder, it's easier to turn back into what you know, right? So like David in Psalm 119, how he was constantly
Mm-hmm.
meditating on the word. In the times of struggle, it's easy to turn back to the word because you know it.
Yeah. It's this was another like video I saw on TikTok. It's a pastor that's been, I think he's a pastor that's been popping up on my for you page. And I don't remember the full context of the clip, but I know he was talking about the fact that he's not only married to his wife when she's in the room,
Mm.
right? And he said it's weird that we often treat God that way, where we're only in a relationship with Him when we're in church,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or we're doing something like overtly ministry related, right? And the point being, right, again, looking at the life of Joseph was not in traditional ministry roles. Even for Old Testament, he wasn't a prophet,
Mhm.
right? Which is like the main ministry like role that you see in that time, right? Um he wasn't even like a king of Israel, he wasn't a judge of like all those things. He wasn't it, right? He was what, a shepherd or a farmer or something, right? Honestly, he wasn't even working in the fields. He got sent into the field to spy on his
Brother.
brothers by his dad, right? So totally lost my train of thought.
He wasn't actively doing ministry work, but he
Yes, there we
constantly
go.
kept
Thank
God
you.
at the center.
Right? So he constantly keeps God at the center, right? He, though he's not, he's taken out of the land that God has called his people to, right?
Mhm.
I I imagine he doesn't have any written version of God's word at that time. He doesn't have, yeah, there's no 10 commandments yet. He doesn't have anyone else to remind him of the stories of what God has done up until this point, right? Through Abraham, Isaac, and his own father, right? He has to keep God at the center on his own, right? And I think it's important for us to see that it is possible to do that no matter the situation,
Mhm.
right? Because I know I've found myself in situations where I've genuinely wondered, how do I keep God at the forefront, right? How do I keep God the center when it does feel like he's forgotten about me, or that he's abandoned me, or that he isn't as close as I need him to be in the situation, right? Yet Joseph, we see in his life, no, it is possible to keep God center, right?
It doesn't
Um,
mean it's easy
right,
in all circumstances and all times, but it's possible.
yeah, and I think with that we see as Joseph positions God as top priority in his life, we see God position Joseph to a place Joseph needs to be for God to fulfill his plan for Joseph,
Mhm.
right? Which is Joseph, by God's design, had to go to this prison to get to the palace,
Mhm.
right? And what we see, even when you read through verses 32 to 42 of chapter 41, right? Specifically 37,
Genesis 41.
Genesis 41, verse 37. It says, the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So at this point, Joseph has interpreted the dream and then given Pharaoh a plan of what to do to survive the famine, right?
The
And
dream was of a famine to
yes.
come.
Um, so Pharaoh asked him, can we find anyone like this man, referring to Joseph, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, and there is no one so discerning and wise as you shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then the Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger and dressed him in robes of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck. Right? Um, when Joseph interprets these dreams, right, he does not deny that it's God. And we see here Pharaoh, who doesn't believe in God, has to then acknowledge God's role in this,
Mhm.
right? Um, Joseph's example reminds of how important it is to let others know that without God we can do nothing. Right? Every ability and gift we have comes from him.
Mhm.
How do you glorify God with your gifts?
I think similar to the way Joseph does it, right? So when people praise you for your skills, well, it's not my skill, right? It's a skill given to me by God. How did you cultivate these things? Well, I gave it to God, right? I said, like, cuz it's I think having grown up in the way that I have grown up, the only way that I knew that I had certain skills or that I built upon certain skills was through the things I did in church,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so a lot of times when people will ask me, "Oh, you're so like you're really young and you have like this really like your sense of leadership about you, right? Outside of church."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Well, I've that's just the way that it's been, right? You see
Yeah.
a need, you fill the need,
Mm-hmm.
right?" And so a lot of times people will be like, because a lot of people don't have those experiences growing up, right? You
Mm-hmm.
go to school, you go home, you play a sport, whatever, but you're not really put in a position of leadership unless it's like you're captain of the team or
Yeah.
whatever. But even then, it's few and far between because not
Mm-hmm.
everyone's going to be captain, not everyone's going to be in a sport at all. Um, so I think it's to just bring the focus back to God, right? Like I didn't cultivate the skill on my own, right? I did it through church.
Mm-hmm.
I did it through, like talking to people in church and to figure out how, like, how to build myself up.
Yeah, I think it's God God gives us the gifts and then he puts us in positions where we can develop it,
Yeah.
right? If we're paying attention, right?
Mhm.
Because again, Joseph could have ignored the two guys in prison, or as we said before, he could
Yeah,
have
he could have
done the
been
bare
petty or
minimum, and
angry
yeah,
and like not interpreted the dreams. He could
right.
have kept it to himself.
He could have been the worst slave in Potiphar's house and not
Yeah.
rose through and all of that, right? But we see, right, that Pharaoh saw God's hand was on Joseph and elevated him to a place of power. Um, Joseph had prepared for this moment without realizing it by running Potiphar's house, overseeing the prison, right? Now he's able to oversee a country,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Um, God had given Joseph the experience and insight to advise Pharaoh, right? Are you ever tempted to question God's path for you?
I think I have been because, like we said, you have to grow and cultivate these skills, right? I think there have been points where I didn't see the skill set in me. So I'm like, God, is this really like what you have for me? Is this really what I'm meant to be? It's not that I'm like doubting God, but it's more so of a doubting myself, right? Where I don't feel like I'm capable or I'm qualified or whatever. But then there's that saying like God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're right. But it's still I think it's still normal to like, have that doubt within yourself.
Yeah, I think I've definitely questioned the path God was taking me on many times. I think I still do it to today sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, but as you said, there is this saying of God qualifies those that he calls, right? Which realistically is what he does with Joseph,
Mhm.
right? He because up I mean, if Joseph had stayed in his family's house, there's no way he would have had the administrative knowledge to do what he does, right? I mean, realistically, it would have that administrative stuff would have probably fallen to like the firstborn, just knowing the way like society, Joseph would have just kind of becoming, I think, lost in that whole shuffle there. Um, so Joseph went from living in the prison, right, at about 17 years old, to sitting at the right hand of the Pharaoh in the palace at about 30, right? we know that God's timing is perfect, even though we think it can be too long, right? Do you think Joseph's elevation, right, from not just prison to palace, but really the pit to the palace, was worth all of the waiting and the test?
I think yeah. I don't think there is any other position that he could have been in that would have justified that. Like by my own like physical standard, because if you think about everything that he went through, right? Like his brothers hated him because he was called from by God, right? So they threw him in a pit, and then they sold him off for like not that much money, I don't think, right? And then he was bought, and then he had a good job, and then because he was so good at his job, his owners or his master's wife got him thrown into jail essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's all these ups and downs where it's like if you're not being elevated past your last high,
Okay.
right, then I don't think it would have been as worth it. So like if he was just put back in Potiphar's house, I don't think that wait would have been worth it.
Yeah, I think with Joseph's story, it reminds us that God is always working in our lives in ways we're not aware of. And I think the most important thing for us to, or one of the most important things, is to remember that we can trust God's timing, His path, His plan, even when we feel confused about it, frustrated with life. Maybe sometimes we feel God has forgotten us, but we can always trust that God will not abandon us, right? And even though we can't see His plan, doesn't mean that He's abandoned us. And that if we stay faithful to Him, we'll see that in His timing, things will work out according to his good, right? And again, that's all I got.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Bye.